Boom. And we are going to be live here. All right. Good morning, everybody. Uh, it is good to be back and welcome to another dialogue. I am here with my good friend, co host, and co star of the show, the famous composer, John Oliver, a maker of some pretty rad music. His new album just came out. I'm going to make sure he plugs that here in the beginning before we go too far. Was listening to it this morning, and I'd listened to it before. Very, very cool synth. Really kind of gets under your skin, makes you feel stuff. So if you're into that kind of stuff, it's super rad. But John, it's been a week or about 2 weeks.
Couple of weeks, yeah.
How have you been? And what's going on?
Well, I must say, I've been disengaging from the news a lot lately. It's just, you walk in and legacy media is playing on, usually through YouTube. I have to say, no plug for Google there. It's just a reality. I don't do cable TV or anything. So I get legacy media only in these little shots on YouTube, and they're all pretty disgusting. I mean,
Yeah,
these guys are nuts.
they
Like
are.
this Todd Blanche guy is an absolute criminal. Never mind, we're not supposed to be talking about that today. But anyway, so I've been kind of getting out of the news cycle
Yeah,
and paying more attention to local things, things that are relevant to my life where I live.
yeah.
And
Most importantly.
not like the noise, international noise is still on the radar. It's just a little less noisy, right?
Yeah,
And so the other thing, of course, is you mentioned the release of the album called They Don't Knock. And for those who may not be familiar with what I do in music these days, it seems, is I call it music of empathy. And so, what I attempt to create in these soundscapes that I create is a kind of music that gets you to feel something about the environment, your life, the news, whatever it is. In this particular case, I sat down in my electronic music studio and I was about to do something that's just kind of preparing for an upcoming appearance this summer at the Sound Symposium. So I'll be presenting a concert of electronic music a solo show that I'm going to do. And I thought, oh, I better, just practice and get my stuff in order for that. And I
yeah,
just touched the synthesizer and something happened. And I said, oh, wait a second, that's not going to be the show, but that's something. So I hit
yeah,
record and I recorded this 20-minute set, I guess, of sound. And then I realized, okay, I've got something here. And that's when this release came together it's just 2 tracks. It's for those who are following the situation in Palestine, it's basically empathy with these people who are being bombarded.
yeah,
So the first track is called 3 a.m. Waiting for Martyrdom. And so if you've heard stories of the people of the West Bank and Gaza, that they really have trouble sleeping at night because the worst time is 3 a.m. That's
mhm,
when the IDF comes in and either raids their house and sets up a post where they take over, they commandeer a house, put the people in the kitchen, and then they commandeer a house and sit there for 3 days observing the neighborhood. That's what happens in the West Bank. And of course, in Gaza, it's just like, are we going to be bombed in the middle of the night?
yeah,
And then the second movement is just called, or second piece, I guess, is just called They Don't Knock.
hmm,
And if you've been following the situation, that's exactly what they don't do. They don't knock. They just
right.
bust the door in or they just blow up your house. Also, a little bit of an echo for people who've been victims of ICE. They don't knock either. They
No,
just
they
bust
don't.
your door down. Right. So, anyway, that's the kind of stuff I do. It's like I need to channel this energy through a musical medium to make the empathy that I feel for these folks who are suffering real in some way instead of just
Yeah,
being, sort of passively doom scrolling the crap that we have to watch, or we wouldn't have to watch it, but we choose to watch it because to not do so feels like you're complicit somehow. And this is why we get tired of the news, and sometimes we have to back off the news and stop taking in so much, because it hurts to see so many people suffering. Anyway, so that's a happy topic.
Well, I think it's important, actually. And I think within that, there is an important subtext, is that you're channeling that into something productive, right? Like that's what I think we should take away. And I mean, I can say that kind of in a similar vein, I've been having an issue, not that it might seem like I've backed off the news, but I haven't. But the issue that I've been struggling with lately is that I am a comprehensive person. When I put something out, I want to give a picture. I want it to be complete. I've been really struggling because it takes me 1 to 2 days to put together a really good analysis, something that will carry. And we have entered an environment where things are evolving so quickly that my methodology that I've typically used as a single person is being outpaced by the dynamic environment. So I'll be 60, 70% done with something, and then boom, oh my God. Like I've been working on a piece for, Lebanon because it's important, but every single day I need to go back and reevaluate. And so it's been really frustrating for me, almost in the same sense. It's like I'm observing, but struggling to find an outlet that works. Because I don't want to be the guy that comes on and says, and then it doesn't matter the next day. That's like the antithesis of what I want to do.
Okay, well, interesting topic, because the details at some point don't matter. The fact that they bombed and completely destroyed another South Lebanese town doesn't change the fact that they keep doing it.
Yeah, correct.
Right. So even though there's new factual information about their bombing of South Lebanon, doesn't change much. It's still illegal, abhorrent, and you can just take a moral stand against it. Right. So at some point, the facts on the ground, okay, but come on, let's not be distracted from the core issue here, which is that it's fundamentally wrong. Absolutely. Oh, and Hezbollah is fundamentally wrong. Yeah. Okay, so war is bad. Well, that's where you and I stand on that to start off with. The whole notion that these conflicts can be resolved through people blowing shit up is just stupid in your, I believe, in your view, and certainly in mine, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it is stupid. But not to go down that rabbit hole today, because
we can't. No,
we don't want to. We want to talk about something that is very different and fascinating. And this is a dialogue, and this is meant to help you guys kind of think about something else and to go a little bit of a different direction. Of course, there's always undertones in the modern world that point back to the depraved state of humanity and how it tends to interact with itself and everything else. But there's a very kind of cool rabbit hole that I stumbled down the other day, and I shared it with John before, and it's about the Amazon rainforest. And it talks a lot about, in this new discovery and new technology, about the things that are in plain sight, if you will, that we assume oftentimes don't exist because we cannot see them. And it leads into this deeper layer of seeing is believing, but believing per se isn't the way things are. And so the video starts with this idea of El Dorado. And those of you that are familiar with the legend of El Dorado, a gentleman sailed down the Amazon rainforest. He traveled. He reported seeing millions of people and cities of gold and all of this grandeur and splendor as he goes down the Amazon rainforest. And of course, generations of people consistently went and looked, and they couldn't find it. They could not find El Dorado. And so they came to say that, well, of course, it must not exist. But interestingly enough, it's not that it didn't exist as much as it wasn't in the shape that we were anticipating to find these things. And there's a lot to gain from the Amazon, and more than just the natural state, but about people, and how much we don't even know about ourselves, that we are discovering every day, that we just don't see in the headlines because it has been relegated to a much lower status of importance, far beneath the violence, and the diplomatic atrocity and complete, like, I'm going to go back to the word depraved behavior that we're seeing every day on our screens.
Right.
So, what is kind of, and John just kind of watched this, so he's a lot like, he watched this, and I'm kind of curious how you would describe the video to someone who's not me, who hasn't read extensively about all of these other directions, and maybe this will help the readers kind of orient as well.
Right. Well, the story of El Dorado is a European story, as Shane has just pointed out. Explorers who were discovering the Americas had these stories. They heard these stories, managed to understand enough of the languages of the peoples of the places that they were talking about this thing about gold and this entity, let's call it, that was called the gold, El Dorado, the gold. Well, actually, another way of in Spanish, if you say El Dorado, it could also refer to a person called the gold one, the golden one. And that's exactly what it ended up being. It ended up being actually a king-like person who was decided by the whole society that he would be the leader. And so they covered him in gold. And then they went through a ritual where he went into the lake. I forget the name of that lake, in the Amazon. And then he would cleanse himself in the lake, and they would throw all these ornaments and gifts into the lake while he was bathing himself. And then he would bathe himself, and all the gold would come off and go into the lake. And then he would come out and be the declared king. And that's what El Dorado actually was. It was a ritual. It was not gold that you go find. They couldn't find the gold because the gold was just used in everyday life, and it was not something that would become, a gold standard in Europe.
The gold standard of the Amazon.
Right. Exactly. So it was just something that they used every day. Right. So anyway, the interesting part of this story, and it's a great video that I hope we'll share a link to that video.
I will. I'll share a link here.
So a brief summary is that a laser technology allowed researchers to bounce lasers off the Amazon and create a map of the Amazon that showed the layers, and so they could then see layers and remove the top layers that we see with our eyes and go down underneath and see the actual human-made things that are buried under the Amazon that none of us have ever seen. So, people have discovered a few civilizations or buildings in the Amazon just through standard techniques of going in there and digging around. This laser technology has revealed thousands of settlements and villages, some of them with populations that could range in the 500,000 people, to show that this was not an empty land that the Europeans discovered. It was a very sophisticated civilization with waterways and farms and cities and, real infrastructure, and that they were very good farmers. They transformed apparently not very fertile land into fertile land by using compost, just like we do today in our backyards. And that it was just a normal civilization that had no ambition to conquest anybody. They just lived as people who still live there today just live, And I want to point out that, I grew up with National Geographic, where you always saw, pictures of naked brown people with bones in their noses, and they were all freaks. And,
Brave New World.
And they all looked, that must be what savages look like.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Gen X and younger took all this in and said, but wait a minute, that doesn't have to be the case. And so, nose rings and piercings became very common. My kids all have piercings, because they understood that these people aren't fundamentally different, and ornaments on your body can be done in many different ways. So in our time, we have tattoos and we have nose rings and all sorts of things like that that create a kind of empathy, let's say, with the South, the global South, and especially I would say Africa. Um, so just to connect things up, because I think all of these things that they're discovering about a civilization that was quite rich before European conquest tells us something about colonialism in general. Because why did the people in South America disappear? Well, it's because the Europeans came with their diseases that Americans, well, the original peoples of the Americas, they couldn't handle it. So they got more or less wiped out by a pestilence.
Correct.
Okay, so the Europeans brought a pestilence that got rid of the people, and then the forest, the rainforest, just ate, covered up their civilization because it grows so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at that, one of the core concepts that caused this disaster, that caused wiping out most of the original peoples of the Americas, what caused it? Colonialism. People wanting to go somewhere else and dominate a different part of the world. So I'm an anti-colonialist. I am descended from colonialists, as all people of European descent in the Americas are.
Yep.
And I can comfortably say that I want to work against the colonial heritage and try to turn things around. And I think the topic today is more or less about how the environment is being threatened by monocultures, that kind of agriculture, and by notions of dominance and exploitation of resources. So I'll let you get into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really good, and I hope that everyone in the chat kind of, when you go and watch this video, and I've been trying to put little bits on the screen to kind of help you guys like visualize with what John was talking about as he was going, and some of these. But the thing I would like to definitely highlight as well here, as we kind of get ready to go farther into this conversation, and I come back to this a lot, is pestilence, right? Or the plague. I believe it was the influenza. I'm pretty sure is exactly what wiped these people out. And the reason there was a substantial gap, I forget, it was like somewhere, it was a couple decades to like 30 years before anyone else came through after this guy who claimed to have seen El Dorado. So like the running theory is this guy comes through, he brings influenza, and then within several decades, everybody's dead. Or the only people who are left are the people that he didn't engage with deeper in the Amazon, probably more isolated from these large scale interconnected societies. Because the one thing you can say, and I will go back here to an image that I think was very helpful in kind of demonstrating this here, is what you can see here in this picture is a mapping of mounds, but these are roads. Okay, so these people, their civilization and this LiDAR, where they shoot lasers from space, and it goes through the canopy and bounces back, and they're able to see these minute differences in the elevation and shape of the ground, allows them to see the mounding and the buildings and the comprehensive society, civilization. It's not a society, it is a civilization. They civilized and actually manipulated the environment that is the Amazon to support and sustain human life, which we consider now to be entirely inhospitable to human beings. There's a trope that if you send someone into the Amazon, they'll die because it is literally full of poisonous things that want to kill you. But these people mastered the Amazon. They civilized it in a sense that it worked for them. You can see these roads. And it's these things that tell us that it the same way, they absolutely would have spread this disease rapidly, en masse, effectively. And if they have no antibodies, they would have died en masse. It would have been
That's right.
It's not a genocide in the literal sense. It wasn't an intentional thing. It wasn't Native Americans being handed smallpox blankets. It was incidental that they brought a pathogen when they did not understand pathogens. I
Right.
do believe if the Spanish came without the pathogen, they would have gotten their butts whooped and they would have been driven out by this incredible, comprehensive, interlocking society of certainly millions of people
Right.
dispersed across the Amazon.
Right.
So the point of all of this is that we are now seeing something that we omitted from the record. The savagery, the savages, to your call back to your National Geographic reference, they are who survived. They are not who was. They are not the people that built these roads. They are not the people that built these massive pyramids, that did landscaping to literally create aquatic canals, irrigation. A great many of the trees in the Amazon are actually domestically planted. They were cultivated. And so when the people stopped maintaining them, they had created a environment, soil, and things like that that were ready to grow quickly. And those trees simply just overtook and buried that society.
Right.
So the only way to find them without LiDAR was hacking your way through the jungle with your sword.
Right.
And braving all of the poisonous things that want to kill you, because you don't have access to their roads. They certainly needed to be maintained. They certainly needed to be clearing brush. They certainly needed to be doing all of these things. Right. And they clearly had the capacity, the scientific know-how, the tooling to do all of these things, because we can see them hundreds of years later with technology that we've almost entirely, forgotten about. And so if we look here at a very interesting diagram that was here, this one, you go right here. So what you see here is a picture of the land use, right? But this is basically, you can see the areas of the forest. You can see the areas that are being used for farming. See all these things. But a great majority of this, you actually, a couple examples in Bolivia, estimated with carbon dating around the Casarabe culture, 8,500 to 1,400. 2022, they mapped an entire 4-tier settlement using LiDAR with platform mounds, pyramids, and kilometer-long causeways, as well as water canals. Water canals. This is Rome, folks. This is the Great Roman Aqueduct.
So,
this is
just to clarify for our viewers, what are we looking at? Are we looking at a map of contemporary area, or is this LiDAR mapping?
That's contemporary. So let me get you the map here.
So that's the current use of the Amazon.
That's not it. There we go. So here's an example of one of these
towns,
societies.
Yeah.
Right. And look, this is the Amazon right here. This is the country of Colombia. Right. Look at how big this area was. Look at the tributaries of the Amazon they have. They had waterways. They had multiple cities. And you can really tell, I mean, just the level of complexity that they were developing here, and that all of this was lost entirely. We had no idea, no idea they existed. The European, people, they were basically under the impression that it was a myth. It was entirely a myth. And that is where I think that this really just becomes so fascinating for me, is that you and me commonly talk of, and for those of you, it was earlier, but you can see this is what LiDAR looks like. So we can kind of talk about the technology itself. All of this is under a canopy, to be clear. If you're looking at this with a normal satellite, you do not see anything. You see treetops.
Yeah.
What LiDAR gives us the ability to do is say, wow, that is extremely elevated. Look at where you can clearly determine a road here. There's a residual structure here of pyramid shape. You can see where they probably had roads. These could easily be like causeways, water, anything like that. And all of these moundings would have been where they piled up some kind of dirt or base to build on. So,
right. Very interesting.
So interesting. And so where I like to kind of want to go with this is we found this all with technology, right? And technology is a double-edged sword. It can help us create things, but also if we operate on the assumption that there's no need to look with these no tools because we've already solved these problems, it's already been a myth. They already hacked around the jungle. They've already just determined that El Dorado isn't a city. Well, without this technology, we couldn't have determined that El Dorado was in fact a person who was in this lake. And I mean, culturally it's there, but to see the settlement and to say, oh, this is where he went, this is what they saw, and this is where the myth comes from, you can really put it to bed. You can say, oh, and that was the use of, in my opinion, responsible use of technology to reevaluate and rediscover something.
Good. Can I jump in just for a second?
Please.
So I think the one of the really important concepts that's behind this is the European or Western European notion of discovery and validation through scientific method. Okay? This is the way we insist things must be done. And when you use the word mythology, that is because Europeans had already discovered in the 15th century the way they invented the printing press, and they could print words so that everybody could read them. Even people who might not understand that written language very well could learn to read that language and learn things from, you know, the next country over where they speak a different language, but they had the printing press, so they had printed words, and ideas could be shared through documents. So Europeans loved documents. So when they invaded America, the Americas, they came with the idea that a document could have power over people. And the people on the ground would say, oh, you've got a document, but here's our story. And a story for a European was a myth. It wasn't true. It was a story. It was a fantasy. They could assert that that was the case because what they wanted to do is to demonize or make insignificant the stories of the people who lived there so that they could come in and dominate by taking a document and saying, our document says we now own your land.
Yeah.
And they would say, what do you mean you own our land? Nobody owns land. People cultivate land and eat food and get by on their daily life. What do you mean they owned the land? They didn't understand the concept that land could be bought and sold. Nobody did that. That would be theft. The person who makes the land fertile, who farms the land, is the person who farms the land. And they had no concept that because that person developed the land, it was theirs and not somebody else's. They didn't have that concept.
The Europeans used the printing press to rewrite the social contract?
Well, there was no social, they had their own social contract, right? They decided that private property was a thing that would guide the way their society was structured, whereas the original people of the Americas did not have such a concept. They had that the whole tribe or the whole society collectively owned stuff and just did things. There was no concept that somebody had to own a piece of property with property lines. They just didn't have that. That was disrespectful. What was respectful was acknowledging, hey, you do a lot of work in this farm area here, so thank you for that. And so it was just kind of a natural way of doing things, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing that the point that I'm getting to, and that is that when the people who are there today have stories that have been handed down through oral tradition through centuries, just because it's an oral tradition doesn't mean it's less valid or less important. But our society likes to say, oh no, if there's no written document, then it doesn't exist. But when the First Nations have their generational stories that have been passed down through the generations, those stories should not be called myth just because they're not written down on a document.
Yeah.
And so I find it really hilarious that we have created a very advanced technology to discover that what the First Nations were saying all along, oh, was actually true. That we had a big civilization and that we had, you know, we were a healthy, vibrant society with fairly advanced ways of doing things, right? Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, like your point, you're like to your point, right? Their contract says, oh, they had nothing. They didn't own this land. It wasn't developed. Well, 937 earthworks over a 5,315 square kilometer area says you're full of shit.
Right.
Sorry. But like that's the point is, well, private property. Well, who owns this giant ass pyramid? Nobody. It just built itself. This whole freaking network of thousands of kilometers of roads
Right.
just is here for the taking. Imagine someone comes into your town and says, hey, so I see you guys have a bank. You've got all these paved roads. I love that you have, a developed town center. I don't see anyone who has any paper claim to this. So it's mine now. And you're all going to pay me to use your stuff that you built. Cool. All right. And I've got a piece of paper that says that that's what they did to the Native Americans. That's what they did to people in Latin America. That's what they did to the indigenous people in Canada. That's what they've done to every indigenous people, the Aborigines in Australia, the natives in East Asia, you name it. That's what you described is basically the part of that. And so I would say that the use of the printing press, to kind of come back, is a irresponsible use of technology. It was a use of technology to do something, effectively colonize people, create the essential physical proof to justify colonial expansion and the ownership of private property.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
What we're doing with LiDAR is a responsible use of technology.
Right.
It's stewardship. It's protecting the oral cultural traditions, recognizing a civilization of people that did incredible things. And we see that far beyond the printing press. Like when the Pope comes out and says you need to disarm artificial intelligence. The Pope, and say what you want about the Catholic Church now, the most violent religious institution Europe has ever created was the Catholic Church. If you've never heard of a crusade, well, I'm sorry, that it is. So the irony of the Catholic Church being the one coming out here and saying, oh, we need to disarm artificial intelligence should not be lost on you as you're looking at this. Be like, there's technology exists. And I've said this before many times in our discussion. I love the analogy of the hammer can either kill somebody or it can build a house. It's entirely up to the individual how you use it. We're at a point in my mind where technology has advanced to such a point that developing technology is not enough. Technology needs to be stewarded in tandem with our environment. It needs to be guided in alignment, in responsible stewardship of our resources naturally, as well as responsible use of that the resources and the technology itself to be successful.
Right. And by responsible, let's be real about it. Like I say, whenever wars are fought over oil, I always say, well, you can't eat oil. So, how's that going to work out for you when you can't have food anymore because you've wiped out your food source, but you can still drive a car? So what are you going to do? You'll be dead. You can't drive your car if you're dead because you have screwed up your food resources. So
I didn't get that far.
Focus on your food first and your car second. I mean, it's like, pay the rent, buy the food. And if you can't afford to license your car, then don't license your car. But you got to eat, right?
But John, I can't drive to the grocery store without my car. Right. So I need to eat.
So, it's a question of priorities, and normal people just who actually shop at grocery stores. Oh, Mr. Trump, what's a grocery store? You've never been to one? So most of us have to eat. and drink water and live. And we're not separated from our biological necessities. And so when these wars are fought over oil and the sun is shining and the wind is blowing and the resources to use natural wind and solar for energy generation are waiting there, and they're cheaper and cheaper to make all the time, the oil oligarchs are just scared because they're going to lose their profit, and they don't care about eating, apparently.
No, because they think that money and power is the end to all things.
Right.
Um,
And that's
and
the
that's
cowardice that comes from the colonial mentality, the idea of
Mhm.
domination, the idea of profit for the few, and the rest can go hang. And that's what we need to just really acknowledge that's happening, and we need to bust the mythology that capitalism itself is inherently good, like a god. Well, yeah, I mean, I would say trade is good and bartering is good, and you do something that's good and I do something that's good, and so we both feed each other by trading our things. Trade is good, but rampant capitalism has never proven to be very good.
No, it has.
Unbridled
There's a direct
capitalism doesn't help everybody. It helps the few. And that's
Yeah.
something that people have to get used to talking about, especially in the US, where, you know, capitalism is God, and if you say anything else, then you're a commie.
We literally have NSPM7 now. Careful if you come here. What you're saying is anti-capitalist. That would make you a domestic terrorist. So you got to
Right.
be really careful.
Exactly. It's crazy.
They're not very good at enforcing it because I see on my social media every day everyone hates capitalism here now because it sucks. And I can tell you that in a quite literal way, if you look at population pyramids that basically will show you the birth rate distribution of age over time, basically every demographic, like for Japan, South Korea, China, the United States, all these capitalist countries experience terminal birth rate decline. In the process of some countries like South Korea, they're effectively doomed to be down like 30-40% of their workforce by 2050. Japan is facing a massive population crisis. This is not abnormal, but the common driving factor is a lot of these countries were exposed to a more directed and kind of forced assimilation of American capitalist values. And we saw those lead to a rapid decline. China is interesting because it kind of did it to itself to compete with the West.
That's true.
And because of that, you're seeing a lot of issues in China where they've made great leaps in technology, but they have done a poor job of stewardship, and their environment has paid tremendously.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it has been China is one of those places I would love to go and be out in China. The geography is incredible. The way they have these like floating mountains and mist and some of the most magnificent caves in the world. It's truly a remarkable, beautiful place where we have a lot to learn. But they have done so much. It's given them a lot of geopolitical power, being the premier destination for refining just about every rare earth metal thing on the planet. That comes at tremendous environmental cost. The chemicals used in these processes are extremely harmful. There are no there's pretty much every single major waterway in China is so polluted right now. And there's a lot of things in China that you don't see, where they have done a good job driving innovation and advancement, but they've done so without accounting for the need of stewardship for that technology in that environment. And that does impact people, and it impacts, are people going to have kids? How long are people living? Are they drinking water that'll give them cancer and they'll be dead by 40? Well, that's going to impact a lot of things.
Right.
You can't just say technology makes things better. It doesn't. It only makes better if you are using this concept of stewardship.
Right.
Because you have an opportunity. We've had an opportunity to specialize as a society, right? You and me are able to specialize. I'm able to specialize in being an analyst. I specialize in looking at information, distilling that information, and then having discussions. You specialize in the composition of music, in looking into, these different social issues, articulating them to people, sharing, performing. Normally, people couldn't do that. They only did that when exercising stewardship, which we can go back to the Amazon and say these societies existed over hundreds of years, easily outlasting the duration of the United States. You think these mountains that we can see from space came up overnight? Certainly not. It's the cumulative process of hundreds of years, in some cases over 1,000 years, of specialization and refinement in a responsibly managed society using stewardship with environment and scientific development.
Yeah. So this is the cornerstone of indigenous practice. Going back to the images that we saw of a vibrant civilization that managed to be good stewards of the place in which they lived, and they got wiped out by a pestilence. So they didn't do anything wrong to get wiped out. They got wiped out by an invader, basically. And so stewardship of resources is one of the cornerstone principles of indigenous stewardship of the land. And so this is something that, I'm kind of glad to hear you say that there are a lot of people who are anti-capitalist now, because what we're talking about, when you talk about stewardship, you're talking about a concept where nobody unduly profits from any process. That the purpose of the process is to sustain everybody and not to enrich a few at the cost to the majority. And that is where capitalism leads. It leads to the enrichment of the few, and the rest of us have to suffer and not live full lives. Like, we think we're living full lives, but if you actually look at how, for example, food is generated for us through agribusiness, for example, if you compare that to the food you get out of the garden that you grew in your backyard, you can tell the difference right away.
Right.
If you eat a carrot that was on a truck for 2 days, you get it in the store and it's a week later, and you compare that to the one that you just went in your backyard and you pulled out of the ground, you know that there's something fundamentally different between those two carrots.
Absolutely.
And so the stewardship we're talking about is local, where people do things locally to support and sustain their own people around them, like local culture, right? So this whole idea of international trade is a double-edged sword, right? Because right now we're in a time where, the Trump tariffs are making international trade more difficult. And the fact that we have to run international trade by shipping things by air, which requires jet fuel, which requires oil, the whole thing becomes a big question as to, well, is this any longer, capitalism versus something else, or left versus right? It's actually a point where the now cliche think globally, act locally. That's a phrase that's been around for a couple of decades. It actually means even more than that now, because if in fact we have to keep relying on jet fuel and oil to have international trade, then maybe international trade has to slow down. Maybe we should be supporting our local things, really seriously support those local things first, and ask ourselves, well, do we really need to have blueberries from Peru in winter? Maybe not.
Great question. These people didn't have certain things during certain times of the year. And look, they colonized the freaking Amazon. I don't like the word. They established a comprehensive civilization spanning the Amazon. They didn't have blueberries year round.
Right.
They ate what they had during the year. You don't
That's right.
need it to be civilized.
Right. And that's the question. That's one of the questions that people have to face, because that question is basically asking you this: can you decrease your consumption? Can you live a life without blueberries from Peru in winter?
Yeah, of
And the answer should be, well, yeah, sure. If
course.
that makes it better for everybody else, if that means that there's less, carbon, what's it called? Carbon monoxide going into the environment,
Just
emission,
greenhouse gases in general.
greenhouse
Yeah.
gases, if it means less greenhouse gases, then that means better fertile soil for more food for us. Then maybe we should have a better environment to work in that is stewarded by not having these excessive and unnecessary international trade, especially when it comes to the shipping of food great long distances. So it really raises the question of how really important is international trade? Do we really need to have so much of it? Maybe we could reduce, reuse, reduce, recycle. It's the 3 R's. And people haven't taken it seriously because they feel like they're entitled to have all of this international trade. But maybe this international trade, which requires airplanes and requires the pumping of greenhouse gases into the environment, maybe that we have to change the way we think in a
Well,
fundamental way. This is a question that I have for everybody.
it's a great question. And let me kind of give you guys some more, because what, John, I think what you're kind of really hammering is that the advancement in, let's call it science, just to be in line with the discussion, the science or the development of an international trade community that allows you to have blueberries from, Peru in the winter is something that is developed, and we needed certain things like jet fuel. Now, do we need those things? Well, responsible development of technology would say, no, we don't. We already have the solutions. They exist. We could pivot away from that. But the development of capitalism, which is a global trade dominated by capitalism and its mandates, makes that situation unlikely. There is a certain result of geopolitical actions in Hormuz that Europe is now pushing to be sustainable and self-sufficient. They can't do that with oil. So they're going to go to sustainable energy. They're going to invest in fusion. They're going to invest in nuclear, and they will do it. And they've been forced to do it because it's economically responsible for them to do it, not because it's the right thing. They would much rather purchase cheap Russian oil, but but Russia invaded Ukraine, and they had to say no, and they still bought oil from Russia. And then Ukraine was like, why are you doing that? And they said, hush, hush, hush. We'll give you some money to fight them while we give them more money for their oil until they stopped. But things like this, right? What's the driver? Responsible use, the development of money, international currency is not responsible, is a good thing if stewarded responsibly.
Right.
Let me give you guys some other examples about how technology is not being used responsibly. The obvious one is data centers. We are not stewarding that technology responsibly. It destroys the land. It destroys the land. It poisons water. It kills people. And it just does a whole lot of damage. And it's not efficient. It's made to meet a singular demand, scrapped together. And it's not, efficient. PBS Terra just did a great video with a independent news network on investigating these data centers, and they are in flagrant violation of EPA regulations. I mean, you can see the chemicals just steaming out of these suckers. It's horrific. And, people in the United States, 7 out of 10 Americans disapprove of data centers.
Right. Let's just give a shout out to Aaron Brockovich, who published this website showing where these things are being developed. And also, let's just make it clear that there's one particular Canadian guy named Kevin O'Leary who's just behind these things 120 per, well, let's say a Trump number, 400%.
400%.
Right, exactly. And so those two centers are in Utah and in an area in Alberta, northern Alberta. And these things are extremely risky. They've been designated high risk by whatever organization Aaron Brockovich is using to designate these things. And I put out a little, I think it was an article or it was a note, I'm not sure, on Substack about that, showing that the three most dangerous ones are two of them in the US, one in Utah and one further south, I can't remember which state, and the one in Alberta. And then the only other one, there's one in the Middle East, and then there's one in Australia or somewhere.
Yeah.
And so these data centers are going to gobble up huge amounts of water, huge amounts of fertile farmland, because that's where they want to put them, out of the public eye. And in the case of was it both the Utah and the Alberta one, it's on indigenous land. So, you take the people who are the most disadvantaged already and just take over their land and put a huge data center that's just going to eat up so many resources. For what? So that I can have the Wikipedia thing summarized by AI right above the Wikipedia result in my Google search? Come on, really? Yeah. I know there's a lot more to AI than that, but most people, that's where they're seeing AI. They're seeing AI everywhere in their meta apps. And whatever app you use, you're being bombarded with AI. You must use AI. You must use AI.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this too, and it's an interesting discussion. I kind of touched on it in the Pal and Talk episode we did on Monday. I'll get that published. I've got a bunch of things I need to publish retroactively that I want to get doing here. But it is interesting when you see that AI, they are actually pretty deep. They're so far down the hole in terms of AI and investment and things like that. And to speak of responsible stewardship, Americans are starting to do responsible stewardship for their environment. They're recognizing they're under threat. 30 to 50% of these data center projects have been shut down entirely or are stalled due to demonstration.
Right.
This is a real thing. Now, they don't report on it because it terrifies them, because if more people knew about this, they would find where their local data center is and they would go join in. And they wouldn't let them work.
Yeah, I just have to congratulate everybody who got out and protested against those data centers. I've been seeing that come through the news. And every time I see another report that another data center got refused in a community, I just say, this is what action, social justice action looks like. You just have to show up and make noise.
Yeah, it's a confluence too. I love the word confluence. I think that everything you look at any given point, you should never attribute it to a single thing, because if we were just protesting, it would stop some of it, but they would be able to muscle through it. But the other thing they're struggling with is getting the resources because of their own decisions. This oligarch capital class. They made decisions under Trump on how to handle global trade. They handed everything to China. They have no leverage, and now they can't get the things they need to even build them if they wanted to, right? So we're very lucky that they are so dumb that we have the people and the motivation to advocate to stop these things before they're built at scale. Because if they are, we would fail entirely in our stewardship of the natural resources we have here in the United States. In Canada, if you're in Alberta, I'm assuming most of your local government is it's like the US. You have a bunch of idiots who captured the political system of the region. And it's not necessarily the people of Alberta. They live in a beautiful place with a wonderful environment. And I'm sure they care about that. And I would hope that they are also advocating to shut these data centers down, because it is a vital threat to their lives. It will kill them. They will get cancer and die. That is the discussion I have with people. It's not a matter of, it's inconvenient. No, you'll die. It will kill you, or you will die. And it goes to the very heart of kind of the things. And let me give you another example of irresponsible stewardship of technology. If you needed another reason to hate Elon Musk, here it is. So we have been struggling on this planet with the depletion of the ozone layer. And it's been healing, actually. We got rid of the aerosols at scale, and we were able to mitigate that. But new studies are coming out that Starlink's satellite matrices are rapidly depleting the ozone layer.
That doesn't surprise me.
Elon Musk launches a new satellite every freaking 5 days So now we have no responsible stewardship rules for how we interact with space. It's open season. And now we're seeing people irresponsibly use this technology without any guidance. And it's again threatening the ozone layer at a time when we are experiencing heightened solar volatility. We are entering a series of time that last time this happened in the 1800s, it had really large effects. There's resonance, in particular, between Uranus and Neptune, that create a geomagnetic kind of sequence that throws a lot of things around, activates parts of the sun, it causes increased geological volcanic activity here on Earth. We're seeing all of these things. And in tandem, we are not responsibly stewarding the planet or the technology. So a lot of the natural safeguards that existed, our failure in stewardship is going to make this harder for us.
Right.
And so it again highlights how important it is that when we use technology, you need to be not only a steward of the environment, society, which is part of the environment, right? The use of capitalism as a system, not responsibly stewarded, led to a depraved class of capital billionaires that have zero empathy and, just don't care. And now they're irresponsible, and they've captured our technological sector. They've captured and suppressed the mainstream science while using their work to advance their own goals. And we failed to steward and guide our technological and scientific advancement, as well as stewarding to protect our environment. The way forward, the way you get the way you get the Amazon, right? And you go here is the conjunction of technology and science in a responsible stewardship of both.
Right.
Not if they just chopped down all of the trees and cleared all of the land instead of working with the land and creating this really special and unique soil that you mentioned earlier in the very beginning to grow these trees and to create these embankments and move water responsibly, stewarding the land with their technology in conjunction, they were able to achieve great things. We could do that on tremendous scales, but the disconnection, I think, between stewardship and technology is a very important thing that I think we're lacking. And kind of as we wrap it up a little bit, I would like for you to kind of give me your thoughts and all that on the discussion, and kind of tie it up for yourself and whatnot as well.
Well, yeah. So the humanity is an interesting thing. Us humans are weird. We like to have strong leaders. We like to have people we look up to, right? And that's what the billionaire class is counting on. The billionaire class is counting on people believing that they are billionaires because they are inherently better than us, and that they've done something remarkable to get all that money, that they deserve all that money because they've done something somehow remarkable, and that they are somehow like gods. And so when they speak to you and they say empathy is a problem, empathy is something that is not a good concept. Now, as a godlike person, they want you to start to believe that. So they keep saying empathy is bad. It's bad for our society because it fights against competition and the development of new things. It's against the expansion of our great enterprises. That's what they want you to believe. They speak like gods, and they want you to believe that empathy is the problem. And they keep repeating that over and over again. You'll hear the Palantir creep, you'll hear Musk, you'll hear all these guys say the same thing. And they want you to believe that, so they keep repeating it.
Yeah.
But you have to recognize this false God, and that you have to believe your own feelings about your own family and your own friends and the people in Gaza who are being bombed. You have to understand that empathy is what makes us human, and that these gods in front of us are false gods. They're like robots. They're like some invader that is trying to take over our society and make us believe things that are actually fundamentally counter to our human nature. And stewardship is something that there's a consensus, I would say, and Shane can, correct me, or tell me I'm right, that the scientific consensus is that stewardship is the way to go, that monoculture is not good,
Yeah.
that corporate capitalism is not good for the planet.
Yeah.
Scientists will all agree that stewardship of the land is what we really all need to agree on and pursue. And that is where I say that contemporary science, and this is actually where we started in this whole thing, is that contemporary science and the indigenous way, these things are coming together to, reinforce the real things that will lead us to a better
Yeah.
society.
I would agree entirely. I think that was kind of the goal I wanted with this discussion is what we can see from space, the things that we assumed weren't there that couldn't happen, in fact, exist. And that the template, and I frequently have said this, I think about this all the time, is if we had used the Latin American indigenous model for modern society, we would be looking at a different planet. But the Europeans won.
Yeah.
They colonized. They wiped everyone out with disease. And now we have what we have. Ironically, Europe, since they, in a large way, kind of propagated and created this whole system, they have now circled more back towards a liberal leaning socialist society because they'd already gone all the way down the road. It's all a big circle, right?
Yeah,
and
we're heading in the right direction.
And now I think that people in America who were extremely inundated are starting to see that this does impact their environment. It does impact their ability to live. It does impact their comfort, and that America can, in fact, have the qualities of a third world country. No water, no easy access to food, no medical care.
Right.
This is not uncommon, especially in the Deep South, where these governments have been captured and corrupted and demonstrate zero responsible stewardship in any way. You see these this environment. Like if you came to San Diego, where the region where I live, from rural Mississippi, you would not think you were in the same country at all.
Right.
We have things they do not have. We have an education system they do not have. It's literally there. The literacy rate in some of these places is still declining in 2026, right? When you're not responsibly stewarding your resources, you see a decline in the advancement of your civilization. And so that's really what it is we can learn and to continue to push for this idea of stewardship in all things we do. And so if you guys,
one thing I've got to add before we
yes,
close, Shane,
go.
The resources are not just natural resources. Stewardship of resources means stewardship of human resources as well.
Yeah.
And what capitalists don't want is for the bulk of humanity to be developed in a stewardship way, so that our human resources, our own potential as individuals, are developed to the max. They don't want that. They want us to be content with our consumerism and content with making just enough money to pass it along to them. But that's not what stewardship of resources and human resources means. Development of human resources means we can realize our own full potential, and we need everybody else along to reinforce that development and stewardship. It's not just an individual thing. The whole society has to agree that we all matter, not just a few gods and billionaires.
I couldn't end it better myself. So I'll leave John with the last word. I hope you gained a little bit of something from today's discussion. I hope that you go and find the video, which I will go ahead and one more time put the link for it in our chat here. before we go. And then I will also make sure to link this video as it was the foundation for this discussion as well. But, you know, I'm so glad we had this discussion today. I really think that we got to do the dialogue thing and get into the nitty gritty of it and take something that was largely scientific and broadly apply it to Indigenous culture and the morality of how we're using our text. So this is really important discussion, and the momentum in this case seems to be good to me, which is a positive note to end on, which I like to, you know, I'd like to say that I am seeing little bits of positivity sprinkled in there as I think people start to change things. So guys, thank you all so very much for joining us for the dialogue. Make sure we reconcile. And John, it was so great to talk to you. And we'll be back with another dialogue here in the near future, either next week or the week after. I think next week. But John's got a busy schedule coming up, so with a lot of stuff going on, so we'll make sure to cater to him. But as always, the dialogue must continue. So we'll see you guys next time.
Peace.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.